What's going on, Facebook family? Welcome to Keep It Real Fridays. Back again, and I'm excited to have this conversation tonight with a good friend, good brother of mine. But before we get started, for those who may be new to what Keep It Real Fridays is, Keep It Real Fridays is something that was started a little bit around 15 years ago. Was considered youth and young adult alternative to provide a space and atmosphere for youth and young adults to have a space that they can be authentic and organic in ministry in their own way and have a safe space. Used to have different groups come out to churches, different just denominations and churches come out and allow youth and young adults to do ministry and mime and rap and go-go and so many different genres of creative arts. So, of course, through the pandemic, can't do Keep It Real Fridays in the church, so we decided to do in a very different way. What we do now is these Friday night live streams to discuss different topics. And tonight we are going to talk about a topic that's going to be a little sensitive tonight. I don't know if sensitive is a word, but you gotta be a grown up to follow this conversation this evening, as we're going to be talking about the sexually liberated Black church. So I'm excited to dig in and dive into that conversation tonight. But you can always keep up with what we're doing on keepitrealfridays.com, which is the website, and you can find previous conversations for over the last 3 months. But what I want to do is just go ahead and get started, and I'm going to introduce my friend, my brother, O'Brien Wimbish. And he has joined us, and every guest has had a connection in some fashion. And I kind of mentioned this last episode 2 weeks ago of how we got connected. When I first started, or as I was first starting ministry, this was the first young preacher that I was able to meet in ministry. And this brother came to preach at my home church, Cornerstone Baptist Community Church in Temple Hills. They would bring him over to preach once a year for a couple of years, I believe. And my pastor at the time, Dr. J.W. Moses, introduced me and said, you need to stay connected with this brother. And we've been connected since. And we were just talking about this right before we started the live stream, that we've been doing this for a long time. So I'm grateful that we're still connected, and I can still call this brother just consistent, and has been a true supporter of my ministry. And so I definitely want to give this opportunity for a platform about a subject that this brother has some expertise in. We're just going to have this conversation. But I'm going to let O'Brien introduce himself in his own way, and then we're going to get started with the conversation.
Hey, what's up, Brakeem? Thank you so much, brother, for inviting me here to just talk about a subject that I think is important for the church, especially the Black church. We have been knowing each other for a long time. I mean, really long. And so thank you for what you do, even for your creativity and in this pandemic. And I pray that even when we go back to normal, whatever that looks like, that you will continue to allow individuals to share and to speak and to bring insights into different topics. So thank you, Brakeem, for all that you do, brother.
No problem, man. No problem, man. So we're going, I'm going to put a disclaimer out there. So we're going to be talking about sex. Sex. I want everybody to know we're talking about sex tonight. S-E-X, sex. All the church folk that are watching tonight, we're talking about sex. Okay, I had to get that out.
Oh, you have to say it like that. Yeah.
Nah. I know somebody going to inbox me later, so I got to put that disclaimer. We're talking about sex, but no, seriously. Yeah, so I've been following, just how God has just been shifting in your life and ministry. And when you approached me with this topic, I was like, yes, let's talk about it. And I know we haven't really, we kind of talked about this in passing, but haven't really got deep into the subject. But for those who may be watching, we're talking about loving your God-given body, and talking about the sexually liberated Black church. So my first question to you, O'Brien, is for many who have especially been in the traditional church, when we put the words sexual liberation and Black church, that doesn't seem to flow together for most contexts. So I want to ask you, what does the sexually liberated Black church mean, and what does it look like?
Good question. Before we begin and delve into that, let me just tell you my journey to being sexually liberated. I grew up as a pastor's kid. My father was a student at Howard University School of Divinity. And in 1996, I got expelled from Largo High School. I will never forget being expelled. And because I was expelled, I had to stay home. And my father, he became my teacher. He was not only my father, but he became my discipler. And I remember he used to put me on the schedule every single day of studying, learning. Listen, I got my kids in the background. They are loud. Y'all don't
You good, bro. You good, bro. Flow.
If they get too loud, somebody chat me, let me know that they're too loud. I'm still Baptist. I know how to shut kids up. And so I was expelled. My father made me, didn't make me, but he was teaching me. And I would never forget going into his office one day and just reading books that he had. He had this one book called The Act of Marriage. I was 15 years old, and I picked up this little book called The Act of Marriage. And that began my sexual education. Because in this book, The Act of Marriage, it was dealing with intimacy and how God intended for marriages to be. It blew my little 16-year-old adolescent horny mind. And so I read that book from cover to cover. I learned about the clitoris, learned about orgasm, learned about all that stuff, learned about the penis, and that's of course that's what I learned about the anatomy of the penis, the anatomy of the vulva, and all that good stuff. And it just blew my mind. And so it was then that I became really interested in sex. And it doesn't help that I had a very liberated father. My father was taking a course in Howard University School of Divinity. I think he was in Dr. Kelly Brown Douglas's class. She wrote the book on sexuality in the Black church. And he said he was one of the only brothers in the class. And he said that class was so eye-opening for him. And my father's very open about his stories because he's been through some sexual trauma as a kid, being molested as a child. And so he had a lot of sexual trauma himself. And so in that class, he began to unpack some of those traumas. And as he was learning and growing and appreciating his own sexuality as a man, as a Christian man, that influenced the house. We would have open conversations as teenagers about sex. That's when I learned that it only takes 3 inches to please a woman. I thought you had to have a 9-inch penis to please a woman. But he said, no, all you need is 3 inches because beyond 3 inches, there's no nerves in the woman. So for the most part, all you need is 3 inches. And I said, oh gosh, as a 16-year-old boy, I took my measuring stick and I said, thank you, Lord, I can please a woman. And so we had these open conversations in my home. So then fast forward, got called to the ministry, all that good stuff. I know you remember Make It Plain Ministry, Brad King, that we started. But then I went to college, Morris College, HBCU, big shout out. Hey, by the way, today is December 4th. And back in 1906, the greatest fraternity in the whole wide world was founded in Ithaca, New York. Alpha Phi Alpha, happy anniversary, happy Founders Day, my brothers. Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. But in Morris College, where I played, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, I got a job. And guess what my job was? I became a program specialist for teen pregnancy prevention in Sumter, South Carolina. And so then sex became my world. I had to learn everything about sex because I was teaching teenagers. I was a teen myself at 18 years old. I was teaching teenagers about sex and sexuality. And we created a manual about healthy sexuality. I was 18 years old creating manuals for middle schools and high schools on sex and sexuality and how to live an abstinent life. That's when they had those big abstinent-based only curriculums type stuff. And so that's kind of my journey to sex and sexuality. And then I never stopped growing in that area of sex and sexuality. And so then over the past like 6 years, I've really started studying it. And then I began getting a practice therapist, a pastoral therapist. And God did something. And as a counselor, I began to see all these clients that had sexual trauma, had sexual concerns. And so I was able to really begin to learn more and more about sex. And I began to realize that, man, there needs to be some sex therapy. And I didn't know that there was a such thing as sex therapists. And so I began to get into that field of sex therapy and sexuality coaching. And so that's what I do now, is sex therapy, sexuality coaching. And I really deal with infidelity, intimacy recovery. And so that's kind of my journey into how I became a sexologist and a sex therapist.
You know, and I want to pull something out of what you just shared, O'Brien. First of all, I know you a very long time, but I don't know if I remember the story about you getting expelled from Largo. I don't think you told me about that one. If not, it's been a long time, but I forgot. But what amazed me about what you just shared was you just sharing with us that your father had open conversations with you about that. So that just intrigued me right there, and I want to just kind of put a pause there, if you don't mind, and just ask you, even as now you are a parent to your own children, and you see how this was an influence of just the open conversation, because and let me put myself in it. You know, my parents stayed away from having a conversation about sex. I don't think my mom or dad ever had a conversation with me about sex. And so for me, if they had the conversation, I probably would have been like weirded out, which most people probably would feel that way. But then again, I look back and I do wonder sometimes, I wish that they did have the conversation with me, because I didn't have to go out there and explore on my own. So I want to ask you the question: how important do you think it is that we should have these type of conversations with our youth, with our kids?
It's essential that we have these conversations with our children. And we're going to love our Black bodies, love our God-given bodies. It is extremely critical, especially as African Americans, to teach our children about how blessed their bodies are. I mean, from their head to their breast, their chest, their stomach, to their penis, their thighs, their knees, their vulva, to their butt. All that stuff, we got to make sure they know that you are beautiful. Because what happens, especially as African Americans, our sexuality was destroyed because of slavery. Destroyed. I mean, they made us hate our bodies. They will beat our bodies. They will make us. They will use our body, our sex, our sexuality to have sex with different men and different women and to breed children. And so, as African Americans, we have to teach our children how to love their bodies. And there's nothing shameful about our Black and brown and tan bodies. There's nothing more beautiful than a Black person's, a Black man's, a Black woman's body. I mean, all bodies are beautiful, but it's critical that we teach our children that, man, you are beautiful. Your body is beautiful. I don't care how, and you tell them this until they are out your house. That no matter how tall you are beautiful. No matter how short you are beautiful. No matter how big your breasts are, how small your breasts are, how big your nose is, how small your lips are. It doesn't matter. Because ever since we've been in America, our Black sexuality has been demonized. demonized. And so if we don't teach our children that you are beautiful, they're going to grow up and continue this cycle of oppression of the body. And they're going to hate their bodies. And if you hate your bodies, how are you going to love your mind?
Mm.
How are you going to love your brothers and sisters? How, as a man, are you going to honor women if you hate your own body? How, as a woman, are you going to love men if you hate your own body? And so as parents, please hear me out. I don't care how young your child is, how old your child is, you teach them about their bodies. And that's my secret way to say you better understand your own body. And you better be able to look at your own, you better be able to stand in the mirror and love yourself. Stand naked in front of your mirror and say, God, I thank you for my body. I thank you that my left breast hangs lower than my right breast. It's still beautiful. God, I thank you for my penis, how big, how small, how wide, whatever. But we have to learn how to appreciate our bodies that God has given us. It's not like we was able to choose the bodies that we got. And if God created you the way he created you, and he created you with purpose, and he created you beautifully, wonderfully made, man, we do a disservice to God to hate our own bodies. So yes, teach your children. I teach my children every day. I remember giving my son a bath, my youngest son a bath. And he was singing a song when I walked past the bathroom. He was like, I love my penis. I love my penis. My penis. Hey, 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 hey. And I'm like, what? And I just let him love his penis. And so now I didn't say stop that, because that's what a lot of the parents do. They see their kids touching themselves. And they say, that's nasty. That's nasty. What's nasty about touching yourself? That's yours. We don't tell kids that they're playing with their hands, don't play with your hands. That's nasty. Or if they're playing with their ears, we don't say, stop playing with your ears. That's nasty. But if they play with put their hands in their pants or in the bathroom rubbing on themselves, we tell them that's nasty. And then they grow up with the idea, especially young girls, that my private part is nasty. And so you want these young ladies to grow up and get married thinking that all their lives they was told that that's nasty. And now you want me as a man to marry your daughter and she thinks she's nasty. And so now we living in a sexless. Okay, we can go on and on about that. But yeah, you got to teach your children about sex.
Yeah,
their bodies.
Yeah, you said something. We'll dive deeper a little bit later. But this is a good segue. And you mentioned about your dad being at Howard University Divinity and studying under Kelly Brown Douglas. And that's Kelly Brown Douglas is a favorite of my church and my pastor. So very familiar. And so when we start to talk about the sexually liberated Black church, I want to ask you the question, should we have a sexual theology? Because we don't often have the conversation in the church, and often when we hear about these conversations, we had a comment coming that's a part of their human growth and development. Yes, indeed. And feel free to ask questions in the chat box. I should have put that out there earlier, or make comments. Definitely share, and we'll try to get those in as best as we can within this conversation. But again, we don't, growing up in church, I never heard a church have a conversation about sex. And you since we turned back the clock and we started talking about Make It Plain, and when we were with Make It Plain, that's probably the first time, like, I was like, man, O'Brien and these cats are doing ministry in a different way. They're having conversations that most churches don't have. And that was part of the reason I was like, man, I got to get connected, stay connected. I want to be a part of this, because it was just like, shh, can't talk about that. And I remember there was times where even as a youth pastor, I've been invited to churches, and, as you're trying to communicate to youth, and as soon as you say the word sex, it's just like, everybody drop their heads down, or, so you might not get invited back to preach if you say the word sex. So I want to ask the question, should we have a sexual theology?
Yes, we should have a sexual theology. Our sexuality is part of our humanity. Our sexuality is how we create life. It's through our sexuality, through sex, that's what God told Adam and Eve, is to be fruitful and multiply. Why? So that we can continue to, as Tony Evans said, have a kingdom family. And when you have a kingdom family, we can really advance the kingdom of God. And so sexuality, yes, you need a sexual theology. Absolutely. Let me just step back a little bit more and talk about why we need a sexual theology. When God created Adam and Eve, the Bible says that they were naked and unashamed. We'll let that sit for a while. They were naked and unashamed. It's when Adam sinned. What's the first thing that Adam did when he sinned? He covered up his sexuality. The very first thing he did was cover up his sexuality. Very first thing. Covered up his sexuality. And so our sexuality has been crucial, even in the very beginning of Scripture. And so, yes, we need a sexual theology, a sexual theology that teaches us that our sexuality belongs to God our Father. He created us as sexual beings. We ought to praise God for our sexuality, for intimacy, for sex, because He created it on purpose, and not just to procreate, but to allow us to connect to one another as husband and wives. So you best believe you got to have a theology of sexuality, because if we don't recognize that our sexuality is from God, it is not bad, it's not evil, but it is blessed. It is holy. It is pure. It is lovely. It is what God intended from the beginning. And not just for procreation, because if it was only for procreation, what would be the point of the clitoris in women? The clitoris has the only real function of the clitoris is pleasure. I mean, a little function on childbirth and stuff like that, but the only real function is pleasure. And so there's a theology of sexuality. Yes, God created us as sexual beings. We ought to thank God for our sexuality, and we ought to understand how to have sex. And we don't talk about how to have sex. And so that's, as a sexual coach, I teach clients how to have good sex, how to close the orgasm gap. That why are so many men having way more orgasm than women? Because no one has taught men how to effectively please their wives. No one has taught women how it's okay to be pleased. And so, yes, we need a theology of sex and sexuality.
For those of you who are just joining us, we're talking about the Sexually Liberated Black Church, and our special guest is O'Brien Wimbish, a pastoral and sex therapist. And put a disclaimer out there: we're not telling nobody tonight that sometimes these conversations get misinterpreted. We didn't say go out there and be Tatiana or be a male thought. That's not this conversation. So don't misinterpret. Definitely share this video, because this is a very out of the box radical conversation for the church. Thanks for answering that question. So it's important to have a sexual theology, but I want to ask you this question: why do you think the subject of sex is so sensitive in the church?
Because it was sensitive for Adam when he sinned. So it's just not the church, but sex has been taboo and sensitive from the creation. You look throughout Scripture, and you see so many incidents where sexuality and sex was a problem. David's sons raped his sister. David slept with Bathsheba and had her husband killed. You go throughout the Scriptures and you see all these people that had been messed up because of sex. And then you get to the early church fathers, where it really got messed up, where people thought the less sex you had, the more holy you were. I mean, listen to that theology. The less sex you had, the more holier you were, which is totally against what God said: be fruitful and multiply. And so you had the early church fathers, some whom even castrated themselves. And then you go throughout church history, you look at the Puritan era and how they separated the body from the spirit. That anything fleshly or bodily was wrong. And so it created this culture of purity. Silly. Deny the very thing that God told us to use to be fruitful, multiply. Deny the very thing that God intended to bring marriages, husband and wife together. You told us it was bad. And then you go through more history and you see that we get more corrupt. And then I already talked about coming to America as African Americans, as Africans to America, and then they totally destroyed our sexuality. And it's not getting any better. And so, yes. I forgot the question. My bad, Brock.
No, why is the subject of sex so sensitive in the church? And you kind of really dived into that.
Yeah, because we hate ourselves. Because that's the first thing we notice about ourselves is our sex and our sexuality, things we like and don't like. And then it's taboo. We make it taboo in our culture. And what I mean by taboo, you just don't talk about it. Taboos are worse than laws. Taboos are worse than culture, because you don't talk. When you have a taboo, you just don't talk about it. And so you don't talk about it. If you do anything, if you bring it up, guess what? You're gonna be outcast. Mm-hmm. And so that's why it's so sensitive, because our sexuality, it reveals us. You are who you are. And so when Adam saw himself, he said, "I'm naked." God said, "Who told you, boy, you was naked?" Yeah, so Adam messed that up for us.
You saying a lot of good stuff, and I got a lot of questions now. But so you brought up and not specifically in these words, but you brought up about the purity movement, and you kind of made reference to the purity movement and how we were kind of taught and I know what I was taught and what I heard, and and being a young preacher, in ministry, Peter Blue just said, need to talk about the taboo. We're gonna get there, Peter. We're gonna get there, Pastor. We on our way. Give us a few minutes. We're gonna get to the taboos. I was trying to hold O'Brien back, because that's one of the subjects we need to dive into. But when we talk about the purity movement basically said, if you have sex, you're going to hell. And so, from a married man to somebody that ministers to married couples or couples in general, I'm not going to make the assumption that it's just married couples, but to somebody that ministers to couples, how do you think that has been an influence on some of the conversations that you have where, this issue about sex comes up in your counseling? Do you think there's a correlation or there's a tie to that?
Say that one more time.
So basically, like the purity movement, many of us were taught that, when we were growing up, if you have sex, you're going to hell.
Yes.
We have a lot of our especially black couples or black married couples who may have learned that type of theology from the purity movement. Do you think that there's any correlation to some of the sexual issues that come up in?
Sure, absolutely. And let me say this about the Puritan movement. I can't remember who it was, but again, this Puritan movement, this chastity, this virginity thing, a big part of it happened out of a rebellion towards marriage. I can't remember what queen it was, but it was a queen that was supposed to get married to a king. She didn't want to marry him. And so she said, I'm going to practice chastity, because I don't want to, not because she didn't want to have sex. She didn't want to get married to that guy. And so all these women started following her, and she was just rebelling against being forced to be married to this guy she didn't want to be married to. So that it had nothing to do with being pure. It had everything to do with, I don't want to be with this guy. So guess what? I'm practicing chastity. I'm a virgin. I'm gonna stay like that. And so that's where really a whole lot of it comes from right there. It's just this lady didn't want to be married to this guy. It had nothing to do with sex. She just didn't want to be married to a guy. And so over the years we made that something, whatever. So, but in counseling, we have so many ideas about sex. Many of these ideas are untrue. Many of these ideas. We have had clients to come to the office and their marriage is pretty much sexless. And it's because all their lives they've been told that sex is bad. Sex is bad. Sex is bad. And so then when you get married, are you supposed to automatically hit a switch and now sex becomes good? No. And so a lot of couples I see, a lot of their sexual problems is a result of what they have learned. And not only what they have learned, but the trauma of being exposed to sex too early, the trauma of molestation, the trauma of neglect. I mean, you got these children walking around with these cell phones, and they're seeing all types of pornography. And pornography has taught so many of us about sex. And let me just say a word about pornography. Pornography is entertainment. Trying to have sex like a porn star is like watching Blackish and trying to raise a family.
Love that analogy, bro.
Yeah, they're there to entertain you. And so I'm gonna stop right there. Yeah, so a lot of problems that I see in counseling is a result of people learning improperly from the church, from pornography, from their friends, and no one has taught them about it. Taught them the proper way to have sex, the proper way to be intimate. No one has told us, especially men, what happens when your wife says, "I'm not in the mood." When your wife says that, many men take that as rejection. My wife rejecting me. She rejected me because she said, "I don't want to have sex."
So can I put a pause right there, bro?
Yes.
And this goes back to sexual theology and just the back and forth stuff that we're taught. And so in what you just said, we were taught sex is bad. If you if you have sex, you're going to hell. This is, you got whatever. And then we say, go get married and have all the sex you want. And then in that case of what you just said, the theology that we teach in church is then that the woman's body belongs to the man. And so if she don't feel like it, you're supposed to give it up.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm messing with some people's theology that might be watching this live. So, if you want to unfriend me, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, and let me say this. The Bible, the bed is undefiled. Let me say that. And we can start talking about kink stuff now. But the bed is undefiled. We can talk about dildos and anal plugs and all that other stuff because the Bible, the bed's undefiled. But let me say this about that. Yes, the bed is undefiled. Let me share this with married couple, because you have in marriages, you have people who are pursuers and people who are withdrawers, and it's a stigma or a stereotype that men are always the pursuer. That's not true. There are a lot of wives who want sex more than their husbands, and they feel the pain of not being able to have sex with their spouse. And it's painful, especially in sexless marriages. Sexless marriage is defined by couples who have sex less than 12 times a year. And that is a lot of couples, especially couples who have been married for 5+ years. Their sex decreases. And we can talk about how to rebuild sex later. But let me go to the bed. Let me go to this part of the bed and found, yes. But also, I want to talk about neglecting your spouse sex. That's serious. That's different from rejection, us feeling rejected or people feeling rejected. There's some people who literally neglect their spouse from sex. The only time the Bible tells us to neglect one another from sex is if we agree upon it for a time. And then the Bible says you come back together. Because what happens is when we are neglected, when we neglect one another's sex, the Bible says Satan is going right there to tempt you. And I see so many couples in my office for infidelity because their partner was neglecting sex. And when the Bible says that your body does not belong to you, I agree with that. That my body, it belongs to my wife. My wife's body, it belongs to me. And so therefore, if my body belongs to my wife, it goes both ways. If she's telling me you're doing too much, hold off, then I must hold off. And it goes the opposite way around. If she says you're not doing enough, I need to do some more. And so yes, there is that your body belongs to one another, but you gotta love one another. It's not saying that you become your body, you become a slave of your spouse. No, there's still a such thing called consent. And you need to have one another's consent. Yes, your body belongs to me, but I love you enough to honor you. I love you enough to know when you are too stressed out, when you need a break, when you are tired, when you just need to be hugged, when you need to be cuddled. And if I can't control myself and miss those opportunities to just love on you, then I got a problem. And my wife needs to help me control my body. I said, listen, that body belongs to me. You got too much lust, you got too much of something in you. And that we need to make sure we are in line and that we are walking together. So yes, your bodies, the Bible does say your body belongs to one another. And so yes, and so if my body belongs to my wife, man, she can have it. Be it she can have it plenty or she can have it less. It's up to her. Same thing with me. But we got to agree.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just say this: a lot of marriages never talk about sex. Never. And we don't talk about how often we want it, pre-marriage, even in marriage. We don't talk about the positions that we like. We don't talk about what feels good. And so everyone is frustrated because we ain't talking. So I don't know if that answers your question there, Brad.
No, that's good. It's good. And I think, and I think you help us get there. We have to, and what Pastor Blue had put in the comments, men need to understand the why that she's not in the mood, but the why is different from neglect. That or that she might not be in the mood that day.
Let me give you a little tip. This is a little sidebar hint about an aphrodisiac. I know I have a legitimate aphrodisiac that every brother, every wife that likes sex and their spouse is not in the mood, I got a great aphrodisiac. You know what that is?
What's that?
To relieve your spouse of stress. The number one reason people don't have sex is because of stress. If you can relieve your wife or your husband of stress, that's the greatest aphrodisiac you can ever have. So fellas, pick up that broom. Wives, make sure the house is clean if you want sex. Husbands, make sure the house is clean. Make sure the children got a babysitter so that you don't have stress. Make sure you clean your room so your partner your spouse won't look over to the right and see bills stacked up on the table. Because if I see a Pepco bill on my table, my wife trying to ride me or something like that, and I'm looking to the right and I got a bill that ain't paid, man, the mood is gone. And so if you want to have a lot of sex, man, relieve your spouse of a lot of stress. That's y'all people that's single, y'all remember that. That's the greatest aphrodisiac you can have is to relieve your spouse of stress.
I read in a book, and I can't remember which book, O'Brien, and maybe you can kind of validate or say it's right or say it's wrong, but I read somewhere where a lot of sexual issues that come out of marriages, specifically in the Black church, comes from financial issues. Or that, a lot of it comes from money. And you kind of touched upon that. I don't know if that's something that you find that's true, that you hear a lot, but and Pastor Peter said bills kill the mood.
Yeah.
So do you think money is a large piece of that?
Yeah,
money, stress of the bills.
Let me tell you why money is a huge problem. Money speaks to betrayal. And so a lot of times it's really not the money, it's that I don't trust you with the money. I don't trust you're making the right decisions. I don't trust you got my best interest at heart. I don't trust that you put I don't trust that you value what that you give some preference to what I value. I don't trust that we are on the same page. So it's not the fact of money. It's more the fact of I feel betrayed by how you do finances because you leave me out or you don't pay bills. I'm not secure. I'm not safe. And so that's the issue is that I don't trust you. I don't trust you with money because you have shown me through the years that you're not gonna take care of us. You're not gonna be a husband or wife, whoever controls the finances, is that you control me through finances. You treat me like a child because of finances. And so finances speaks to betrayal. Because you got couples that got very little money that love each other because they trust each other. Even though we only got $200 left this month, we paid all the bills, we got food on the table, and baby, I'm gonna take this $200 and we're gonna invest $2 or $20, and then we're gonna spend it wisely. Man, you can be poor and be strong financially. You don't have to have a lot of money, but it's an issue of trust and betrayal. I feel betrayed. You spending money on this and that. I'm trying to go to nursing school, and you just bought a new Infinity, and you telling me now we don't got the money for me to go to nursing school. Really? So finances speaks to I don't trust you. That's why finance is so hard.
Wow. Couple more questions, O'Brien. One, and I want to save the taboos for the last question. But this particular question, as a sex therapist, what is your approach to promoting healthy sexual relationships?
You said say it again?
Like, what's your approach? How do you promote healthy sexual relationships as you go into it? You've been doing this for a while. You've had a lot of conversations with couples. You see the patterns of issues. So how do you approach promoting healthy sexual relationships?
Yeah, I approach it this way. Number one, do you have a relationship with your creator, with God? That's number one. You cannot have a healthy sexual relationship without a healthy relationship with He who gave us our sexual bodies. Because if we don't acknowledge God and recognize that our sexuality is divine, then we will abuse our bodies. We will abuse our sexuality. So number one, you got to recognize that my sexuality belongs to God. It belongs to Him. It doesn't even belong to me. It first belongs to Him. Then secondly, you got to learn how to love your body. Love your eyes, love your mind, love everything about you. Love what you like. Love it. I said, man, it's okay that I don't have the same preferences as you. It's okay I don't look the same way as you. I think I look good. I think I'm beautiful. I think I'm handsome. And you have to have a healthy idea of self. And then once you have that, then you can have a healthy relationship with sexuality and your sex. But it starts with God, then it starts with your mind, and then it goes to your sexuality. So yeah, that's it.
Awesome, man. Awesome. For those of you just joining in, we are talking about the sexually liberated Black church and how to love your God-given body. Our special guest is O'Brien Wimbish, a pastoral and sex therapist. If you look right at his name on the screen, he has his website there on the screen, www.overandbeyond.life, and you can get more information about what he does and the type of services that he provides. And I welcome you all to go visit and get in contact with O'Brien, and there may be some things that you want to have a further conversation or explore. But one of my final questions, I'm not sure if this is the final question, but one of my final questions I want to ask, because I and honestly, I'm excited about this conversation because I'm radical. I like out the box stuff. That's been me all my life. And so this has been a great fruitful conversation. And it's been a different conversation because these are the type of conversations like we've been talking about. These are the type of conversations we don't have in church. But when you tag the flyer on the page, you mentioned about sexual taboos. And you had in parentheses about masturbation, about premarital sex, about porn. You kind of touched on that, a few of those things. I want you to touch because as both as youth ministers, and we have ministered to youth, ministered to young adults, and one of the main questions I have gotten over the years is if I masturbated, Reverend Brackeen, am I going to hell? Am I disappointing God? We know that porn in the church, statistically is a huge thing. People, they statistically, they say that, more people in the church are watching porn than people that are not in the church, things of that nature. So I want you to kind of touch on some of these taboos that we hear about, that we're uncomfortable talking about. We'll talk about it here. Like I said, somebody was watching, they may delete me because we're talking about sex. It's okay. We talking about healthy sexual theology and relationships here. But can you touch on some of that, bro?
Sure. I'll just start with masturbation. Again, that came out of this conservative movement of masturbation. Is masturbation a sin? Does it send you to hell? Let me start off by saying the act of masturbation is not a sin. There is proven research that there has been babies in the womb of their mothers masturbating. Proven research that in the womb of their mother, they were masturbating, touching themselves, bringing themselves to pleasure. And so, of course, that's not sin, masturbation. Pleasuring yourself. It's not sinful. Because if it was sinful to pleasure yourself, no one would get a massage, no one would get a pedicure, none of that stuff. And so, no, masturbation is not a sin.
When somebody going to comment, they're going to say, holiness is still right. Holiness is still right.
What's unholy about experiencing the pleasure that God has given us? It's holy about pleasure. Man, pleasure is holiness. Oh gosh, yes, be pleasure, be holy. You try to be holy with my wife tonight and say, God made me holy. And so masturbation is not a sin. As a matter of fact, I teach. There's some clients who have premature ejaculation. They come too quickly, and so you have to teach them how to delay ejaculation. And one way you teach them that is you teach them you show them teach them through masturbation. Is once you give yourself, as you're masturbating, once you get to that point of 7 out of 7 to 10, once you get past 7 is the point of no return. So you teach them, get yourself up to that point to 7, you stop, do it again, take it to 7, then you stop until you can build up enough. You can build up enough. What's the right word? You can handle enough pleasure to last longer. And so one way you teach that is you teach them to masturbate. You say, okay, you do that, you do this. Now, and then with women, again, we talk about the pleasure gap. Many women, especially in the church, have never experienced orgasms. Many wives have never experienced orgasm, never. And that's fine. That's fine. As a matter of fact, let me say this, that most men think that penis and vagina sex brings women to orgasm. Literally only about, I'm gonna be very gentle with this, but only about 25% of all women orgasm through penis and vagina sex. And so what does that mean? Then they must learn how to stimulate their clitoris in order to bring themselves to orgasms. And so you got to teach women to explore their own vulva, what brings them pleasure. And so that as they explore themselves, when their husbands get involved, so don't be awkward, they can tell their husband, touch me right here, because they have had experience with what brings me pleasure. instead of having a frustration and just going through the motion of sex and faking orgasms. And let me say this, women, please stop faking orgasms. You don't anybody a service. We think we're doing something and you are miserable. Please stop. Please stop faking orgasms. If you don't have an orgasm, just be pleased. You don't have to, orgasm is not the goal of sex. Pleasure is. So you don't always have to have an orgasm to have good sex. Anyway, I digress. And so masturbation. To some women, you got to teach them, be comfortable with yourself. Take a mirror and look at your vulva. Just like men's penises get erect, women's vulva engorges. And so they get aroused as well. And many men and women don't know when they are at arousal. And so, so masturbation is sin. No, what is a sin is when you are lusting. And I know people say, well, how can you masturbate without lusting? I just told you. But it is a sin when you are lusting, when you are masturbating, and you are, lusting this girl and thinking about this girl, thinking about that girl. And people say, well, how that's the only way you can masturbate. No, that's the only way you learn to masturbate. And so you can unlearn that too. You don't have to be watching porn to masturbate. And I say, I stop right there. You don't have to watch porn to masturbate. So is masturbation a sin? No. And I use the same illustration with drinking. Is drinking a sin? Absolutely not. What's a sin? It's when you overconsume liquor. Is eating a sin? No. What is a sin is when you overconsume it. Is masturbation a sin? No. But when you use it to lust, yes, that's a sin. You can use it for pleasure. Ain't no sin with pleasure. You can use it to learn your body. Ain't no sin with learning your body. Build up your stamina. Ain't no sin. Yeah.
The people don't really hate me now. I don't know if you're comfortable or willing to talk about, but just the taboo of premarital sex. You brought it up. You tagged me, so I gotta ask.
Here's the taboo of premarital sex. Is premarital sex a sin? Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a sin. It's a sin. There's no way around it. Premarital sex is a sin. God intended sex for marriage, to bring the husband and a wife together as one, to enjoy one another. And so when you have sex outside of marriage, you are having sex with somebody else's own spouse. So yes, that's a sin. The taboo with it is that you are evil. You are no good. You are a slut. You are a hoe. Then we start shaming people. That's the sin of it. That's the taboo of premarital sex. You're not bad because you want to have sex. You're not bad because you had premarital sex. I mean, here's the reality of it, and I don't know how to get around it. We don't get married until we're 29, 30 years old. Back in Israel days, first century, people was getting married at 16. How old was Mary, the mother of Jesus? Like 15, 16 years old. So they was getting married when they was at kind of into their sexual peak. And so they married. And so we don't get married until we 27, 29, 30. And so believe me, most of us will have sex outside of marriage. That doesn't make you less holy. It doesn't make that's not going to make your penis shrivel up or your vagina, messed up. I ain't gonna do none of that stuff, guys. But it is sin, and I do encourage you, man, that use your body to honor God. And as like Paul said, if you have to have sex, man, really think about marriage. Don't get married only for sex, but really start considering that. But your body if it doesn't belong to your spouse, it belongs to God. And so the taboo is that you're bad, you're a hoe, you're a slut, you're a dog, you ain't gonna find no man who gonna murder you. You got 2 kids, man. There's a lot of brothers that would murder you. There's a lot of sisters that would murder you. You're not a slut. You're not a hoe. You're not a dog. You're none of that stuff. You're just a human. So yeah, I hate that. I hate that, and I hate how much time we got left. And speaking on that, shaming people, I got a problem with the black church shaming my brothers in the LGBT community. Like, what right do we have to stand in the pulpit and talk about these people? Not these people, talk about my brothers and my sisters and shame them and call them all type of faggots and quiz and dykes. Come on, preach it. Man, I believe if Jesus was still living, man, he'd be hanging out with homosexuals. Is homosexuality a sin? Absolutely. Absolutely. But that doesn't mean you bully them. That don't mean you pick fun at them. It's just, I hate preachers that bully the brothers and sisters in the LGBTQ community, LGBTQ plus community. Just stop. Preachers, pastors, stop. We know that homosexuality is a sin. Just say that. Just say that. Anyway, that's a whole nother subject.
No, it's good that you brought it up, O'Brien, and it actually helps going into my next question, because many people that may be watching this may have different type of sexual theology, and we all may not come to an agreement on things that you may have shared. There may be somebody that says holiness isn't right, or there may be some that feel like it's right to bully, even though, like you and myself, we think it's wrong to shame and bully. I have grown up in the church long enough where I've seen people that have admitted to their pastors that they are having sex, and and seeing the distance. We push youth, and as a youth pastor, we push so many youth away from the church. We push so many young adults away from the church because of our disagreements, or how we view theology, and we actually push people off, and sometimes in directions that are unhealthy, and also when they're having to deal with their sexuality, but the church shamed me. I just needed somebody to talk to. I needed somebody to be honest with. I need because I'm having these emotions. I'm horny. I'm having these hormones, and I have nobody to talk to, and people are telling me, nah, you don't got a place here. Or I've seen couples go to pastors that are looking for premarital counseling, and they were denied counseling because y'all living together. And if y'all living together, y'all probably having sex. So I can't do your counseling, or I can't marry you. And I've just seen the fall with youth and young adults as it pertains to the subject. So that's why I don't have a problem with having this conversation with you tonight, because you and me, we've seen the dark side, especially when it comes to our youth and our young adults.
Absolutely. I remember going to a church, and the church told me, don't talk about sex in here, because our kids don't have sex. Lord have mercy. Yeah.
Wow. So I went off on a tangent because my heart and my passion is with youth and young adult ministry, and what I really wanted to ask you, bro, was like, when we have these differences of opinions, when we want to say, that the inbox that I'll get tomorrow is, Brackeen, holiness is still right. Why are you talking about this? Why y'all talking about this and that? But when we have these differences of opinions, what type of resources would you refer people to when we're having like these debates and sexual theology? Or are there books that we can turn to? You mentioned Kelly Brown Douglas earlier, which is a good resource.
The first book I would recommend is the Bible. Get your Bible out, read it. That's number one. A book I would recommend when we have differences. That's a tough one. All right, let me just recommend some books. One book. Let me just grab one real quick. I want you to look at this book right here. I think every lady ought to get this book right here. Come As You Are. It is a masterful piece. masterful piece. Husbands, I recommend you get this book too. There's a section in here, I think, for husbands as well. This is probably a gem for sexuality. It's not a Christian lady. There's going to be some stuff in it that is not the Bible, but from a physiological perspective, from a biological, physiological perspective, from a sexual perspective, it is a great resource. Come as you are. Let me see. This book right here, John Gottman's book. I know our time is up, Bracken. John Gottman's book, The Man's Guide to Women. Brothers, wives, do yourselves a favor, wives, and get this book for your husband. Get it for you. He's a Jewish guy, but get it for your husband. Last book, I got so many books. I'm gonna give you one more that I love. My brother Ben Coley, Pastor Ben Coley, you gave me this book, A Passionate Marriage. Hey, hear me out. It got some cuss words in it. It's okay. You'll appreciate his cuss words. But listen, get this book, A Passionate Marriage. Those are some books that I would recommend just from a sexuality perspective. You have a lot of books. Again, the book that I said earlier, not intimate lives, but Active Marriage. That's a great book. You got, I think it's Ed Young. I got a wonderful book. Pure Sex by Ed Young. It's a wonderful book. So anyway, it's a lot of good books out here.
Thanks, O'Brien, man. This has been an awesome conversation. If y'all saying what I'm saying, just behind O'Brien, this plethora of a library that he has in the background, I've long have been jealous of O'Brien's collection of books, and I'm up here looking at my two little small bookshelves right now, and his is like 3 times the size of my book collection. So I definitely have written down these books to pick up and this for my journey, and good recommendations. I definitely think that at some point, I think we got to have a part 2 of this. This was a great conversation, and it's okay to disagree. One thing I'll say, one of the things that I can say that I made some of those mistakes early on in ministry, because I basically started to teach what I heard, or I started to teach and just mimic, what other pastors were telling me until, what you said, that number 1 book is the Bible. And it's really digging deeper into the scriptures and digging deeper into the exegesis of the text.
Read Song of Solomon.
Yeah.
Stop right there. Man, he teach you everything, or some people believe she teach you everything you want to know about sex. I mean, that joint nasty. That should be really mature.
Yeah. Brother Scott Bolden, Minister Scott Bolden said we need more than 16 people on this live hearing this. Definitely share this live stream. It will be on YouTube. It'll also be on my website, keepitrealfridays.com. It will be on the website tomorrow for those to go back and view this conversation. But thank you, O'Brien. This was great. Man, we said a lot in about an hour, but it was good. And it's just a conversation that it's going to take more than an hour to unpack. So definitely, I'm excited this first conversation, and definitely y'all go to O'Brien's website, Over and Beyond that Life. Take a look at what this man of God is doing, and just see what resources are out there. And it might not be necessarily for you. It might be somebody in your family. It might be somebody, your best friend that called you fussing about their marriage last night, or somebody that that are having some of these issues. And sometimes we try to have conversations that we don't have expertise about. But I suggest that, oh, that's a whole nother conversation right there. and especially,
everybody's expert when it comes to sex. Everybody's expert when it comes to sex.
and too often, and I'm not saying that that single people don't have wisdom. That's not what I'm gonna say. But so often the married couples are turning to the single folk for the expertise, you know. And not to say that the single folk don't have nothing to offer, but a lot of times, you know, we don't utilize the resources out there with the, you know, the pastoral therapy, the sexual therapy, the things that you have to offer. So that's because I know there's gonna be a single person that inboxes me that says, I give good advice. I tell my friends all the right thing, but definitely y'all go check out OB's website over at beyond.life. There's a lot of people posting and just saying thank you for this conversation. This was a great topic, and I'm glad to unpack it with my brother. So y'all have a blessed one next week. We will come back next Friday. I have my good friend Tania Mabry, who's going to be talking about her book release. We're going to be talking about Black wealth, and she's going to talk about I gotta pull up the name of her book that she's written, and it's the 7-Figure Net Worth. So if you have questions about money, we talk about having a relationship with sex today, but next week we're going to have a conversation about having a relationship with money, and how that impacts us as a Black community. And so definitely when she shared with me about the 7, because I'm trying to get to 7 figures. So I need to have this conversation with Tania next week so we can figure out how we can all not just become rich so that we can hoard money like some of our counterparts in society, but that we can give back to our communities and build our Black communities. But thank you, O'Brien. I appreciate you, brother. Thanks for joining. Join us next week for our special guest, Tania Mabry, and continue to follow Keep It Real Fridays, keepitrealfridays.com. God bless y'all. Have a blessed one.